The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions as the USS Defiant moved through the outer reaches. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars pass by on the main view screen. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed. The supply run had been routine so far, exactly the kind of boring mission that made crews careless. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant sat at her tactical station, running regular sensor sweeps. She had been doing this job for 5 years and her instincts were sharp. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The region they were passing through was too quiet, too empty of the usual background chatter that filled most space lanes. The cargo hold of the Defiant was filled with medical supplies, food rations, and equipment destined for the colony on Epsilon 7. On paper, the ship looked like an easy target. It was classified as a bulk freighter, the kind of vessel that pirates and raiders love to hunt. The hull was scarred and patched, giving it the appearance of a ship that had seen better days. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh was in the engine room, making adjustments to systems that didn't appear on any official manifest. His hands moved with practiced ease over controls that most engineers would never recognize. The Defiant had secrets, layers of deception built into every deck and corridor. Danny knew every one of them. On the bridge, Ensign Amy Cooper maintained their course with steady hands. She was young, only 24, but she had graduated top of her class at the academy. Navigation was more than just plotting coordinates for her. It was an art form, a dance with gravity wells and stellar phenomena that she loved more than anything. The alert came without warning. Lisa's console lit up with contact markers, 12 of them, appearing from behind an asteroid cluster that the Defiant had just passed. The tactical officer's voice was calm but urgent as she called out the contacts to Captain Morrison. Jake set down his cold coffee and moved to stand behind Lisa's station. His eyes scanned the tactical display, taking in the formation of the approaching vessels. They were Krell warships. There was no mistaking the distinctive energy signatures. The reptilian species had been expanding their territory aggressively for the past 3 years, and humanity had clashed with them more than once. The Krell ships moved to surround the Defiant with military precision. Within minutes, the human vessel was trapped in a perfect sphere of enemy warships. Each Krell vessel was twice the size of the Defiant, their hulls covered in weapon ports and armor plating that gleamed in the starlight. Communications Officer Peter Yang received an incoming transmission and patched it through to the main speakers. The voice that filled the bridge was harsh and grating, translated from the Krell language by the ship's computer. It belonged to Commander Vexcor, the leader of the Krell battle group. The alien commander's message was simple and arrogant. The humans had 60 seconds to power down all weapon systems and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance would result in the immediate destruction of their vessel. Vexcor spoke as though the outcome was already decided, as if the humans had no choice but to surrender. Captain Morrison listened to the entire message without expression. Around the bridge, his crew waited for his response. They had trained for this moment, prepared for it. But the reality of facing down 12 warships was something else entirely. The mathematics of the situation seemed impossible to overcome. Lisa kept her eyes on her console, watching as the Krell warships charged their weapons. The aliens were confident, perhaps too confident. They had positioned their ships for intimidation rather than tactical advantage. It was a formation designed to make prey panic and surrender, not to fight an actual battle. In the engine room, Danny received a quiet message from the bridge. His response was a simple thumbs up to the security camera. He began bringing systems online, hidden systems that drew power from shielded reactors buried deep within the ship's superstructure. The Defiant began to wake up, though from the outside nothing appeared to change. Lieutenant Greg Palmer at the electronic warfare station started preparing his equipment. His job was going to be crucial in the next few minutes. The Krell relied heavily on networked communications for their battle coordination. If he could disrupt that network, the enemy fleet would lose much of its effectiveness. Navigator Kelly Price made subtle calculations, plotting maneuvers that would give the Defiant maximum firing solutions while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. Her fingers danced across her console, making adjustments that were measured in fractions of degrees and tiny bursts of thruster power. The countdown from the Krell continued. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. Commander Vexcor's voice became more insistent, demanding compliance. The alien commander expected fear, expected begging, expected the humans to realize how hopeless their situation was. Captain Morrison finally opened a communication channel. His voice was steady and clear as he responded to the Krell ultimatum. He informed Commander Vexcor that humanity did not surrender to threats. He stated calmly that the Krell had made a serious error in judgment, and that they would soon understand the consequences of that error. The alien commander's response was laughter, a hissing and clicking sound that the translation software rendered as amusement. Vexcor told his subordinates to prepare to fire. The humans were clearly insane or stupid, possibly both. It would be a pleasure to destroy such foolish creatures and claim their cargo. 10 seconds remained on the countdown. Jake looked around his bridge at the men and women who served under his command. Each one met his gaze with determination. They knew what was about to happen. They had volunteered for this duty, understanding the risks and the necessity of what they were doing. The Krell opened fire, but not with full power. Warning shots lanced through space, passing close to the Defiant's hull. Bright orange energy bolts that were meant to terrify and convince the humans that resistance was futile. It was a show of force, a demonstration of the overwhelming power the aliens possessed. Captain Morrison gave a single-word command: execute. The word was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of months of preparation and planning. Around the bridge, consoles came alive with new data as systems that had been sleeping suddenly activated. The hull of the Defiant began to change. Panels retracted along the length of the ship, sliding back to reveal weapons that shouldn't exist on a cargo vessel. Plasma cannons emerged from hidden bays. Railgun turrets rose from recessed mountings. Missile tubes opened like the eyes of a predator waking from sleep. The trap had sprung, but not in the way the Krell had expected. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't even know it yet. Commander Vexcor watched from his flagship as the human vessel began its transformation. His eyes widened in disbelief as weapon systems appeared from what he had believed was a simple cargo ship. The intelligence reports had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. This was no defenseless freighter waiting to be plundered. On the bridge of the Defiant, Lisa Grant's fingers moved across her tactical console with practiced speed. Targeting solutions appeared on her screen faster than she could call them out. The Krell had positioned themselves perfectly for an ambush, but that same positioning made them ideal targets. They were close enough that even basic weapons would have trouble missing. Captain Morrison remained standing in the center of the bridge, his posture relaxed despite the tension of the moment. He had learned long ago that a calm commander helped keep the crew focused. Panic was contagious, but so was confidence. His people needed to see that he believed in them and in the ship they served on. The first volley from the Defiant was devastating. Railguns fired solid slugs of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic fields. These projectiles crossed the distance to the nearest Krell ships in seconds. The aliens had raised their shields, but the barriers were calibrated for energy weapons, not kinetic impacts. 3 Krell warships took direct hits almost simultaneously. The railgun slugs punched through shields that might as well have been tissue paper. They penetrated armor plating and buried themselves deep in the alien vessels before the kinetic energy transformed into heat and explosive force. Internal systems ruptured and exploded as the projectiles tore through decks and compartments. Plasma cannons added their fury to the assault. Superheated gas contained in magnetic bottles launched toward the Krell formation. When the plasma made contact with the enemy shields, it created cascading failures in the defensive systems. The Krell had excellent shields against most weapons, but plasma had a way of overwhelming the power systems that maintained those barriers. 2 of the Krell ships that took the initial railgun hits exploded spectacularly. Their reactors, already damaged by the kinetic impacts, overloaded from the plasma strikes. The explosions were bright enough to temporarily wash out the visual sensors on nearby ships, both human and alien. Debris scattered in all directions, some of it impacting the shields of other Krell vessels. Ensign Amy Cooper at the helm was already executing the maneuvers that Kelly Price had calculated. The Defiant rolled and accelerated, moving with an agility that contradicted its bulk freighter classification. The inertial dampeners struggled to keep up with the sudden changes in velocity, and everyone on the bridge felt the pull of G-forces. Danny Walsh monitored the power systems from engineering, watching as massive amounts of energy flowed from the hidden reactors to the weapon systems. The official specs for the Defiant listed a single fusion reactor capable of powering basic systems and minimal defensive weapons. The truth was very different. 3 military-grade reactors hummed deep in the ship's core, producing more than enough power for sustained combat. Lieutenant Greg Palmer activated his electronic warfare suite, sending out targeted jamming signals toward the Krell fleet. The aliens relied on tight communication networks to coordinate their battle tactics. Palmer's interference turned their advantage in numbers into a liability. Individual Krell captains suddenly found themselves unable to communicate with their commander or coordinate with their fellow ships. Commander Vexcor screamed orders into his communication system, but only half of them got through to his subordinates. The jamming was selective and intelligent, allowing some messages through while blocking others. The result was chaos as different Krell ships received conflicting or incomplete orders. Some began evasive maneuvers while others tried to close for attack runs. The third Krell ship hit in the initial volley was burning but not destroyed. Its crew fought desperately to contain the damage and restore their weapons. Fire suppression systems struggled against the intense heat from the plasma strike. The ship's captain ordered all power diverted to shields, abandoning any hope of returning fire in favor of simple survival. Captain Morrison called out his next orders in a steady voice. "Focus fire on the flagship. Take down their commander." Lisa acknowledged and adjusted her targeting priorities. Every weapon system on the Defiant that could draw a line to Vexcor's ship began cycling through firing solutions. The Krell were attempting to reform their attack pattern, but the human ship refused to stay still long enough for them to execute coordinated strikes. Amy Cooper flew the Defiant like a fighter craft, using the ship's surprising maneuverability to stay ahead of enemy targeting computers. She jinked and rolled, dove and climbed, always keeping the most dangerous Krell ships off angle from their optimal firing positions. Missiles launched from hidden tubes along the Defiant's flanks. These weren't the simple explosive warheads that most freighters carried for asteroid clearing. These were military-grade smart missiles with adaptive targeting systems and electronic countermeasures. They spread out in a pattern designed to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers and unpredictable flight paths. The Krell point defense guns opened fire, filling space with streams of projectiles intended to destroy the incoming missiles. They succeeded in intercepting about half of the human weapons. The other half got through, slamming into Krell hulls and detonating with shaped charges designed to penetrate armor. More alien ships took damage, their armor cracking and their systems failing. Peter Yang monitored the communication channels, listening to the Krell chatter that Palmer's jamming hadn't completely blocked. The aliens were panicking. Their confident voices from just minutes before had turned to fear and confusion. They didn't understand what was happening. The intelligence reports had promised an easy target, not this nightmare. On the Krell flagship, Vexcor watched his tactical display with growing horror. He had started this engagement with 12 ships against 1. Now 4 of his vessels were destroyed or disabled, and the human ship hadn't taken any significant damage. The shields on the Defiant were holding strong against the scattered and uncoordinated Krell fire. The alien commander tried to order a tactical retreat, but Palmer's jamming cut off the transmission before it could reach more than 2 of his ships. Those 2 vessels began to turn away from the fight, their captains deciding that survival was more important than victory. Vexcor cursed them for cowards even as he understood their decision. Lisa Grant reported that the flagship was in optimal firing range. All weapons were charged and ready. Captain Morrison gave the order without hesitation. "Fire everything." The Defiant's broadside lit up like a miniature sun as every weapon system discharged simultaneously toward the Krell command ship. Railgun slugs, plasma bolts, and missiles converged on Vexcor's flagship from multiple angles. The Krell commander had seconds to realize what was happening before the devastating barrage struck home. His shields collapsed under the overwhelming assault. Armor plating vaporized or tore away in massive chunks. Systems throughout his ship began failing in cascading sequence. The bridge of Vexcor's flagship went dark as the main power systems overloaded. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. The alien commander looked around at his crew, seeing the same shock and disbelief on their faces that he felt. They had hunted what they believed was prey and found a predator instead. Commander Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The trap had worked even better than expected. The Krell had been so confident in their intelligence and their numerical superiority that they hadn't even considered the possibility of deception. That arrogance had cost them dearly, and the battle was far from over. The remaining Krell warships scattered like fish fleeing a shark. Their tight formation dissolved into chaos as individual captains made their own decisions about how to respond to the threat. Some tried to flee, others attempted desperate attack runs, and a few seemed frozen in indecision, unable to process how badly their ambush had failed. Captain Jake Morrison studied the tactical display with the intensity of a chess master. Each Krell ship represented a threat that needed to be neutralized, but the order in which they were dealt with mattered. He pointed to a cluster of 3 vessels attempting to coordinate their approach. "Those ones next," he told Lisa Grant. "They're trying to work together." The Defiant banked hard to starboard, its enhanced engines pushing the ship into a turn that would have torn apart a normal freighter. Amy Cooper grunted against the G-forces, her hands steady on the controls despite the strain. She had plotted a course that would bring all 3 target ships into a single firing arc, maximizing the damage they could inflict. Danny Walsh watched his power distribution screens in engineering. The hidden reactors were performing flawlessly, producing steady streams of energy to feed the hungry weapon systems. Coolant flowed through reinforced pipes, carrying away the tremendous heat generated by sustained combat operations. Every system was operating in the green, a testament to months of careful preparation and maintenance. The 3 Krell ships that had attempted to coordinate their attack found themselves facing the full broadside of the Defiant. Their captains realized their mistake too late. They had bunched together for mutual support, but that just made them easier targets. Lisa's fingers danced across her console as she assigned weapons to each target with ruthless efficiency. Railguns spoke first, their magnetic coils humming with power as they launched projectiles downrange. The solid slugs crossed the distance in heartbeats, each one aimed at critical systems identified by the Defiant's targeting computers. The Krell shields flickered and died under the kinetic assault, unable to handle impacts from multiple directions simultaneously. Plasma cannons fired next, their deadly payloads following in the wake of the railgun strikes. The superheated gas found weakened shields and exposed hull plating. Metal turned to vapor under temperatures that rivaled the surface of a star. Explosions blossomed along the flanks of all 3 Krell vessels as their armor failed and internal systems ruptured. One of the 3 ships managed to return fire, launching a spread of missiles toward the Defiant. The human ship's point defense systems engaged immediately, filling space with precisely targeted energy beams. Most of the Krell missiles exploded before reaching their target, but 2 got through the defensive screen. The impacts rocked the bridge slightly as the missiles detonated against the Defiant's shields. Damage reports flowed across Lisa's console, but the news was good. Shields holding at 87%, no hull breaches, no casualties. The ship had been built to take punishment as well as dish it out. Lieutenant Greg Palmer intensified his jamming efforts, focusing on the 3 ships currently under attack. He wanted to ensure they couldn't call for help or coordinate any kind of effective defense. His systems intercepted their distress calls and emergency transmissions, blocking them before they could reach the other Krell vessels or any reinforcements that might be lurking in nearby systems. Kelly Price had already calculated the next maneuver, anticipating the captain's orders before he gave them. She fed the navigation data to Amy's console, highlighting the optimal path to engage the next set of targets. The Defiant would need to execute a complex series of burns and turns, but it would position them perfectly for another devastating attack run. 2 of the 3 Krell ships under assault were burning wrecks now, their crews abandoning ship in escape pods. The 3rd was trying to limp away, its engine sputtering and its hull venting atmosphere from dozens of breaches. Captain Morrison considered destroying it, but decided to let it go. "Let them see what happens when they hunt humans," he said quietly. Peter Yang picked up increased chatter from the remaining Krell vessels. Their communications were becoming more frantic, more desperate. The word retreat appeared in several translations. The aliens were breaking, their will to fight dissolving in the face of unexpected and overwhelming resistance. Commander Vexcor's flagship was still in the fight, but barely functional. The alien commander had managed to restore minimal power to some systems, but his ship was combat ineffective. He could see the tactical situation clearly enough to understand that his battle group was being systematically destroyed. Pride warred with survival instinct as he watched another of his ships explode. A Krell vessel attempted a suicide run, its captain deciding that if death was inevitable, he would at least take the human ship with him. The alien warship burned its engines at maximum power, building speed as it aimed directly for the Defiant's center mass. The kamikaze attack was brave but ultimately futile. Amy saw the threat coming and adjusted their course with practiced ease. The Defiant slid sideways through space, thrusters firing in a pattern that pushed them clear of the collision course. As the Krell ship flashed past, Lisa Grant put 3 railgun slugs into its engines. The alien vessel lost power and went tumbling away. Its suicide run turned into an uncontrolled drift. 4 Krell ships remained combat-capable, and they were all trying to escape now. Their formation had completely collapsed. Each captain was concerned only with saving his own ship and crew. They scattered in different directions, hoping that the human vessel couldn't chase all of them simultaneously. Captain Morrison made a quick decision. We pursue the 2 heading toward the asteroid field. Let the other 2 run. His reasoning was sound. The ships fleeing into open space would make it back to Krell territory and spread word about what happened here. The 2 heading for the asteroids might try to hide and regroup, and he couldn't allow that. The Defiant surged forward, its engines burning bright as it gave chase. Danny pushed the reactors to 90% capacity, giving Amy all the speed she could handle. The ship accelerated like a missile, closing the distance to the fleeing Krell vessels with impressive speed for something of its size. The 2 Krell ships weaved between asteroids, trying to use the rocky cover to break the Defiant's targeting locks. It was a decent strategy, but they were dealing with a crew that had trained extensively in difficult combat environments. Lisa Grant adjusted her targeting solutions to account for the obstacles, and Kelly Price fed Amy navigation data that threaded them through the asteroid field without slowing down. The first Krell ship took fire as it emerged from behind a large asteroid. Railgun slugs and plasma bolts found their mark. Tearing through the vessel's aft section, the ship's engines exploded, sending it spinning into a collision with a nearby asteroid. The impact finished what the Defiant had started, crumpling the Krell warship like paper. The second ship tried to surrender, its captain broadcasting on all frequencies and shutting down his weapons. Captain Morrison considered the request for a long moment, before ordering Lisa to disable rather than destroy. A precise railgun shot took out the Krell ship's main reactor, leaving it powerless but intact. The crew would survive, but they'd be stranded until someone came to retrieve them. The Defiant emerged from the asteroid field and turned back toward the main battlefield. Debris floated everywhere, the remains of Krell ships that had expected easy victory. Escape pods drifted among the wreckage, carrying survivors who would have incredible stories to tell when they returned home. Commander Vexcor sat in darkness on his ruined flagship, listening to the reports from his surviving crew. 8 ships destroyed or disabled. 4 escaped, though 2 of those were damaged. His own vessel was a floating wreck. The ambush had been a complete disaster, a humiliation that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Captain Morrison surveyed the results of the engagement with grim satisfaction. The Defiant had taken minor damage, nothing that couldn't be repaired by Danny's engineering team in a few days. His crew had performed brilliantly, executing their training with precision and discipline. The Q-ship concept had proven itself in the most decisive way possible. The message would spread through the Krell Empire and beyond. Humanity would not be easy prey. Their ships could not be judged by appearance alone. The species from Earth had teeth and claws, and they knew how to use them. Any civilization that thought otherwise would learn the same harsh lesson the Krell had learned today. The bridge of the Defiant hummed with quiet activity as the crew began damage assessment and salvage operations. Captain Jake Morrison walked between the stations, checking on his people and reviewing the preliminary reports that were coming in from all departments. The battle had lasted less than 20 minutes, but those minutes had felt like hours. Dr. Sophie Allen emerged from the medical bay and approached the captain with her datapad. She reported 3 minor injuries, mostly bruises, and 1 sprained wrist from a crew member who had braced wrong during a hard maneuver. No serious casualties, no fatalities. Jake nodded his approval, knowing how much worse it could have been. Lisa Grant was already compiling a detailed after-action report, documenting every shot fired and every tactical decision made during the engagement. This information would be valuable for other Q-ships in the fleet, helping them refine their strategies and tactics. The program was still new, and every engagement provided lessons that could save lives later. Engineering teams moved through the ship, assessing damage and beginning repairs. The Defiant had taken several direct hits, but the reinforced hull plating had done its job well. Most of the damage was superficial, scorching and minor dents that would need to be patched but didn't compromise structural integrity. The shields had absorbed the worst of the enemy fire. Danny Walsh sent a message to the bridge confirming that all primary systems were operating normally. The hidden reactors were being powered down to standby levels, their heat signatures masked by the cooling systems built into the ship's superstructure. Within an hour, the Defiant would once again look like nothing more than a cargo vessel to any casual scan. Peter Yang was monitoring the communication channels, listening for any sign that Krell reinforcements might be on the way. The two ships that had escaped were far enough away now that they wouldn't be coming back, but there was always the possibility of other enemy vessels in the region. So far, the channels were quiet except for the distress beacons from the Krell escape pods. Captain Morrison made a decision that some might find controversial. He ordered Peter to broadcast the locations of the escape pods on emergency frequencies that any passing ship could pick up. The Krell survivors would be rescued eventually, whether by their own people or by another species. Leaving sentient beings to die in space didn't sit right with Jake, even if they had been trying to kill him minutes earlier. Amy Cooper was already plotting their course back to the original supply route. The delay caused by the battle would set them back several hours, but they should still make their delivery window to Epsilon 7. The colony was expecting those medical supplies, and Jake didn't intend to disappoint them. Lieutenant Greg Palmer was securing his electronic warfare systems, making sure that all the jamming signals had been properly shut down. He didn't want to accidentally interfere with legitimate communications in the region. His systems had performed perfectly during the engagement, disrupting the Krell coordination exactly as planned. Kelly Price was running calculations on fuel consumption and comparing them to their reserves. The battle and the pursuit through the asteroid field had burned more fuel than a normal cargo run would use, but they had plenty left to reach their destination and return to base. The Defiant's enhanced engines were efficient despite their power. On the main view screen, the wreckage of the Krell battle group floated in silent testament to the cost of underestimating humanity. Commander Vexcor's flagship was visible among the debris, its hull torn and blackened but still intact. Jake opened a communication channel to the crippled vessel, knowing the Krell commander could probably still receive transmissions even if he couldn't send them. The captain's message was simple, but carried significant weight. He told Vexcor that this battle had been unnecessary, that the Krell had chosen to attack an innocent vessel going about its lawful business. He explained that humanity didn't seek conflict, but neither would they accept being victimized by aggressive species. The message concluded with a warning that other human ships had similar capabilities, and any future attacks would meet similar responses. Vexcor heard every word through the emergency system still functioning on his bridge. The alien commander's pride was wounded more deeply than his ship. He had been so certain of victory, so confident in his numerical advantage. The humans had turned his trap into a slaughter, and he would have to live with that failure for the rest of his career. The Defiant sensor officer reported that scan data from the battle was being compiled and encrypted for transmission to Earth Command. The data included detailed information about Krell weapons, tactics, and ship capabilities. Intelligence analysts would study this information for weeks, looking for patterns and weaknesses that could be exploited in future engagements. Dr. Allen moved through the ship, checking on crew members even though most hadn't reported any injuries. The psychological impact of combat could be just as real as physical wounds, and she wanted to make sure everyone was handling the stress appropriately. Most of the crew seemed in good spirits, riding the adrenaline high that came after surviving a dangerous situation. In the mess hall, crew members who weren't on duty gathered to discuss the battle. Stories were already beginning to form, tales of specific moments during the engagement that would be told and retold until they became part of the ship's history. The gunner who had made a particularly difficult shot, the moment when Amy had dodged the suicide run, the expression on everyone's faces when the hull plates retracted to reveal the hidden weapons. Chief Walsh gathered his engineering team for a debriefing, going over every system failure and every unexpected behavior during the battle. The hidden reactors had performed beyond expectations, but there were minor issues that needed to be addressed. A coolant line had developed a small leak. One of the railgun magnetic coils had shown slightly elevated temperatures. Nothing critical, but Danny insisted on excellence from his department. Captain Morrison received a secure communication from Earth Command. They had been monitoring the battle through the Defiant's real-time data feed and wanted to congratulate him and his crew on a successful engagement. The Q-ship program had just received validation that would ensure its continued funding and expansion. More vessels would be converted, more crews would be trained. The message also contained new orders. Instead of returning to base after delivering supplies to Epsilon 7, the Defiant was to continue its patrol route through the outer reaches. Command wanted the ship visible, wanted word of this engagement to spread through the region. The psychological impact of the battle would be amplified if the Defiant continued to operate openly in contested space. Lisa Grant finished her tactical analysis and sent it to the captain's console. Her report highlighted several areas where the crew's performance could be improved. Despite the overwhelming success of the engagement, she noted that their initial response time could have been faster by 0.3 seconds. One of the missile salvos had been slightly less coordinated than optimal. These were minor issues, but Lisa believed in constant improvement. The ship's chaplain, an older woman named Ruth Collins, moved quietly through the corridors. She made herself available to anyone who wanted to talk, offering comfort or just a listening ear. Combat changed people even when they won decisively. Ruth had seen enough battles in her career to know that processing the experience was important for long-term mental health. Outside the Defiant, the debris field was already beginning to disperse. The momentum from the explosions was slowly pushing wreckage apart, spreading it across a volume of space that would make salvage operations difficult. In a few weeks, this battlefield would be nearly invisible except to the most detailed scans. Commander Vexcor finally managed to get his emergency transmitter working well enough to send a message to Krell High Command. The transmission was brief and filled with shame. He reported the loss of 8 ships and the complete failure of the ambush. He described the human vessel and its unexpected capabilities. He ended by suggesting that the Krell should reconsider their aggressive expansion policies, at least where humans were concerned. The response from Krell High Command would take hours to arrive, but Vexcor could already imagine what it would say. There would be questions about his competence, demands for detailed explanations, possibly a court-martial. His career was likely over, ended by a single engagement against what should have been easy prey. Captain Morrison stood looking at the view screen, watching as the Defiant slowly turned away from the battle site. The supply run would continue. The mission would be completed. His crew had proven themselves capable and disciplined under fire. The galaxy had learned an important lesson today about the danger of underestimating humanity. The stars stretched ahead, infinite and uncaring. Somewhere out there, other species were making their own decisions about how to interact with the newcomers from Earth. Some would choose friendship and cooperation. Others would choose hostility and conflict. The Defiant and ships like it would be ready for whatever came next. 3 days after the battle, the Defiant approached Epsilon 7 with its cargo still intact. The colony appeared on the view screen as a collection of domes and structures clustered on the surface of a barely habitable moon. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, reviewing the supply manifest one final time before making contact with the colony administrator. The people of Epsilon 7 had no idea what had happened in the outer reaches. Their communication systems were basic, limited to short-range transmissions and the occasional data packet sent via passing ships. They lived simple lives on the frontier, focused on survival and the slow work of terraforming their moon into something more comfortable. Amy Cooper brought the Defiant into a standard orbital approach, her hands moving with practiced ease across the helm controls. The transition from interstellar travel to orbital mechanics required constant tiny adjustments to account for the moon's gravity and the larger planet it orbited. She made it look effortless, though the calculations scrolling across her screen told a different story. Peter Yang established contact with the colony, transmitting their identification codes and cargo manifest. The response came back quickly, filled with relief and gratitude. The medical supplies in the Defiant's hold were desperately needed. A local virus had been making people sick, and the colony's own pharmaceutical production couldn't keep up with demand. Danny Walsh supervised the preparation of the cargo hold for unloading. His engineering team checked and double-checked the container seals, ensuring that nothing had been damaged during the battle or the subsequent journey. Every crate and container was accounted for exactly as it should be. The Krell had never gotten close enough to threaten the actual cargo. Lisa Grant used the time in orbit to continue her tactical analysis. She had compiled detailed profiles of the Krell warships, documenting their weapons, shields, and maneuvering capabilities. This information was being transmitted back to Earth Command through secure channels, adding to humanity's growing knowledge of potential adversaries in this region of space. The unloading process took 6 hours, with shuttles moving between the Defiant and the colony surface. Each trip carried precious supplies that would make life easier for the colonists. Medicine, food concentrates, spare parts for critical systems, and personal items requested by individual settlers. Simple things that meant everything to people living on the edge of known space. Colony Administrator Frank Martinez came up on one of the shuttles to personally thank Captain Morrison. The two men met in the Defiant's small conference room, sharing coffee while Frank expressed his gratitude. Jake accepted the thanks graciously but didn't mention the battle. The colonists didn't need to know how close their supplies had come to being lost or destroyed. Frank talked about the challenges of frontier life, the constant struggle to maintain systems with limited resources. The colony was growing slowly, new families arriving every few months seeking a fresh start away from the crowded worlds of the inner systems. Each new arrival brought hope and also increased demand on the colony's infrastructure. After Frank returned to the surface, Captain Morrison gathered his senior staff for a meeting. They discussed the new orders from Earth Command and what it meant to continue their patrol instead of returning to base. Some crew members had been looking forward to shore leave, but everyone understood the importance of their mission. Lisa suggested they vary their route and schedule, making it harder for potential attackers to predict their movements. The Krell had clearly been tracking them somehow, gathering intelligence about cargo ship routes through the outer reaches. If the Defiant became less predictable, it would be harder to ambush and also more effective as a deterrent. Kelly Price proposed several alternate routes that would keep them in the patrol zone, but avoid establishing any obvious patterns. She had mapped out courses that would take them through busy shipping lanes, past mining operations, and near scientific outposts. The Defiant would be visible and active, showing the flag and demonstrating that human space was protected. Danny Walsh reported that all repairs were complete and the ship was ready for extended operations. His team had worked efficiently, patching the minor damage and running full diagnostics on every system. The hidden weapons were back in their concealed positions, making the Defiant look once again like a harmless cargo vessel. Dr. Sophie Allen brought up the subject of crew morale. Everyone had handled the battle well, but continued deployment without the expected break could lead to stress and fatigue. She suggested implementing a rotation of rest periods and recreational activities to keep people fresh and focused during the extended patrol. Lieutenant Greg Palmer mentioned that he had been monitoring communications across the region. There were rumors spreading about a human cargo ship that had destroyed a Krell battle group. The stories were already being exaggerated and distorted, but the core message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated or attacked with impunity. The meeting lasted an hour, with each department head contributing their perspective and expertise. Captain Morrison listened carefully to all of them, asking questions and considering different viewpoints. Leadership meant trusting his people and using their knowledge to make better decisions than he could make alone. After the meeting, Jake spent some time in his quarters writing a personal log entry about the engagement. These private thoughts would never be part of the official record, but he found the exercise helpful for processing his own feelings about the battle. He had ordered actions that resulted in hundreds of Krell deaths, and that weight was something he needed to acknowledge privately. The Defiant departed Epsilon 7 on schedule, beginning its extended patrol through the outer reaches. The ship's course took it along major shipping routes where other vessels would see it and spread word of its presence. The psychological warfare aspect of the Q-ship program was just as important as the actual combat capability. Over the following weeks, the Defiant encountered numerous other ships from various species. Traders, miners, explorers, and scientists all plied their trades in the frontier regions. Jake made a point of being visible and friendly, establishing communication with every vessel they passed and offering assistance when needed. The reputation of the ship and its crew grew with each encounter. Word spread about the cargo vessel that was more than it appeared, the human ship that had crushed a Krell ambush. Some species viewed this news with respect and admiration. Others saw it as a threat or a challenge. The galaxy was taking note of humanity's growing presence and capability. A merchant captain from a species called the Torvash shared news that the Krell Empire was in turmoil over the failed ambush. Commander Vexcor had been recalled to the homeworld to face judgment. The loss of 8 warships was a significant blow to Krell prestige and military strength. Some factions within the Krell government were calling for revenge, while others counseled caution and a more careful approach to humanity. Peter Yang picked up increased chatter about human military capabilities. Species that had previously been dismissive or condescending in their communications were now more respectful and cautious. The balance of power in the region was shifting, not because humanity had suddenly become more powerful, but because others were recognizing the power that had always been there. Lisa Grant continued to refine the Defiant's tactical database, incorporating information from every scan and sensor reading they collected. The ship's computers were building detailed profiles of vessels from dozens of different species. This intelligence would be valuable if conflict ever broke out with any of them. Amy Cooper grew more confident with each day of flying, pushing the Defiant through complex maneuvers and challenging navigation scenarios. The ship responded to her commands like an extension of her own body. She had developed an instinctive feel for its capabilities and limitations, knowing exactly how hard she could push before systems started to strain. Danny Walsh kept his engineering team sharp with constant drills and simulations. They practiced emergency repairs, power distribution problems, and damage control scenarios. The actual combat experience had revealed a few weaknesses in their procedures, and Danny was determined to address them before the next engagement. Dr. Allen organized social events and activities to keep the crew connected and maintain morale. Movie nights in the mess hall, exercise competitions, and informal discussion groups gave people ways to relax and bond with their crewmates. The sense of community aboard the Defiant was strong, forged by shared experience and mutual respect. Captain Morrison received regular updates from Earth Command about the broader strategic situation. The Q-ship program was being expanded rapidly, with more vessels being converted and more crews being trained. The Defiant's success had validated the concept and demonstrated its effectiveness. Humanity was building a defense network that would make attacks on their ships costly and unpredictable. The weeks turned into months as the Defiant continued its patrol. There were no more combat engagements, but the ship's presence had an effect on the region. Piracy decreased noticeably along the routes they traveled. Aggressive species became more cautious in their dealings with human vessels. The reputation of the Defiant, and by extension all of humanity. 6 months after the battle with the Krell, the Defiant had become something of a legend in the outer reaches. Stories about the ship circulated through every trading post and space station in the region. Some of the tales were accurate, many were exaggerated, but all of them carried the same fundamental message. Human vessels were dangerous, even the ones that looked harmless. Captain Jake Morrison received a communication from Earth Command requesting that the Defiant return to base for a scheduled maintenance period and crew rotation. The extended patrol had been successful beyond expectations, and now it was time to let another Q-ship take over the region, while the Defiant underwent upgrades and improvements based on lessons learned during their deployment. The crew received the news with mixed feelings. Everyone was eager for some time on a planet with real gravity and open skies, but the Defiant had become home in a way that surprised many of them. The bonds formed during combat, and months of close quarters living were strong. Leaving the ship, even temporarily, felt like saying goodbye to family. Lisa Grant had compiled mountains of data during their patrol, intelligence reports that would be studied at the Academy for years to come. Her tactical analyses had already influenced training programs and doctrine development for other Q-ship crews. The lessons of that first engagement with the Krell had been thoroughly documented and distributed throughout the fleet. Amy Cooper had logged more flight hours in challenging conditions than pilots with twice her experience. Her skill at the helm had improved dramatically. refined by constant practice and the demands of maintaining their unpredictable patrol patterns. She had received commendations and was being considered for promotion to a position training other helmsmen. Danny Walsh and his engineering team had refined the Defiant systems to a level of efficiency that impressed even the designers who had converted the ship. The hidden reactors operated more smoothly than they had when first installed. The weapon systems responded faster and more reliably. Every centimeter of the ship had been optimized through months of continuous operation and adjustment. Dr. Sophie Allen had maintained the physical and mental health of the crew through the extended deployment. Her proactive approach to wellness had prevented the kind of problems that often emerged during long missions. The crew's fitness scores and psychological evaluations were better at the end of the patrol than they had been at the beginning. A remarkable achievement. Lieutenant Greg Palmer had become an expert in alien communication systems and electronic warfare tactics. His ability to disrupt enemy coordination had been the decisive factor in the battle with the Krell, and he had continued to develop new techniques during the patrol. His work was now required reading at the Intelligence Training Center on Earth. Kelly Price had mapped dozens of new routes through the outer reaches, documenting safe passages and hazards that other ships could use. Her navigation data was being incorporated into updated star charts that would benefit both military and civilian vessels. The frontier was becoming less mysterious and dangerous thanks in part to her meticulous work. Peter Yang had established communication protocols with dozens of alien species during the patrol. His diplomatic skills and linguistic abilities had helped smooth over several potentially tense encounters. He had built relationships with captains and traders from across the region, creating a network of contacts that would be valuable for years to come. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, following the major shipping lanes through increasingly populated regions of space. The contrast between the frontier and the core worlds was striking. Traffic increased dramatically as they got closer to human-controlled space. Stations became larger and more sophisticated. The raw edge of the outer reaches gave way to the organized civilization of the inner systems. News of their return preceded them. When the Defiant approached Earth orbit, they received congratulations from Fleet Command and instructions to dock at the primary military station. A formal ceremony was being planned to recognize their achievements and the success of the Q-ship program they had helped validate. Captain Morrison addressed his crew one final time before they docked. He thanked them for their professionalism, their courage, and their dedication. He reminded them that what they had accomplished was bigger than any individual, that they had helped ensure humanity's security and changed the way other species viewed their kind. His words were simple but heartfelt, and many crew members found themselves emotional as he spoke. The docking process was smooth, Amy Cooper bringing the Defiant into its berth with her characteristic precision. The clang of magnetic locks engaging signaled the end of their deployment. For the first time in months, the ship was connected to a station, drawing power from external sources and allowing its own systems to rest. The crew disembarked in stages, each department securing their areas before leaving the ship. There would be a skeleton crew remaining aboard during the maintenance period, but most personnel were granted extended leave to visit family and recover from the long deployment. The farewells were bittersweet, with promises to stay in touch and hopes of serving together again. Danny Walsh stayed behind to brief the maintenance crews who would be working on the Defiant. He had detailed notes about every system, recommendations for upgrades, and lists of minor issues that needed attention. His pride in the ship was evident as he walked the engineers through its capabilities and quirks. Captain Morrison met with Fleet Admiral Susan Hayes in a secure conference room on the station. The Admiral congratulated him personally on the mission's success and asked detailed questions about the engagement with the Krell. She was particularly interested in the psychological aspects of the Q-ship concept and how effective the deception had been. Jake explained that the key was believability. The Defiant had to look and act like a real cargo vessel in every way until the moment weapons were needed. Any detail that seemed wrong would alert suspicious observers. The crew had to be comfortable playing their roles, maintaining the fiction even during routine encounters with other ships. The Admiral revealed that based on the Defiant's success, 20 more cargo vessels were being converted to Q-ships. The program was expanding rapidly, with different designs and capabilities being tested. Some would focus on different weapon systems, others on electronic warfare or rapid response. The goal was to create uncertainty, making every human cargo ship a potential threat. The formal ceremony took place 3 days later in one of the station's largest gathering spaces. Captain Morrison and his senior staff stood in dress uniforms while the Admiral presented commendations and medals. The event was broadcast throughout human space, showing citizens that their military was capable and their frontier was protected. Media requests flooded in, everyone wanting to interview the crew of the famous ship that had destroyed a Krell battle group. Jake agreed to a few carefully controlled interviews, but insisted on protecting his crew from excessive attention. They were soldiers doing their jobs, not celebrities seeking fame. Lisa Grant was recruited to teach at the academy, sharing her tactical expertise with the next generation of officers. She accepted the position but requested assignment to another Q ship after a year of teaching. Combat had changed her, given her a sense of purpose that desk work couldn't match. Amy Cooper received her promotion and a new posting as a flight instructor. She would train helmsmen for the expanding Q ship fleet, passing on the skills she had developed during the Defiant's deployment. Her students would benefit from her real combat experience and her natural teaching ability. Danny Walsh was offered a position overseeing Q ship conversions at the main shipyard, but he declined. He wanted to return to the Defiant after its maintenance period, to continue improving and refining the ship he had come to love. His request was granted, understanding that his expertise was most valuable in the field. Dr. Allen published several papers on maintaining crew health during extended combat deployments. Her work influenced medical protocols across the fleet and earned her recognition from the medical community. She too chose to return to the Defiant, believing her place was with the crew rather than in a research facility. The other crew members received their own opportunities and recognitions. Some chose to continue their careers on the Defiant, while others moved to new assignments or positions. The team that had fought together was scattering to spread their knowledge and experience throughout the fleet. 3 months later, the Defiant undocked from the station with a partially new crew and significantly upgraded systems. Captain Morrison remained in command, along with a core group of veterans from the original deployment. New faces filled other positions, eager young officers and enlisted personnel who had specifically requested assignment to the famous ship. The second patrol began much like the first had, with a routine supply run that would take them back to the outer reaches. But everything was different now. The Defiant was no longer an experimental concept but a proven weapon. The galaxy knew what it could do, and that knowledge itself was a form of power. Word had spread among the Krell that Commander Vexcor had been executed for his failure, a harsh reminder of the price of underestimating humanity. His replacement as fleet commander had issued orders.